The moment Alex Eala walked off the Cincinnati court, something strange happened. The tennis didn't stop. The tournament didn't stop. 7 other top 10 players were still in the draw. But the atmosphere changed almost instantly. The noise that had followed Eala through the week disappeared, and the stadium suddenly felt like a completely different place. Thousands of Filipino fans had been waving flags, chanting, cheering, and turning ordinary matches into something that looked more like a national celebration. Then Eala lost, and those same stands became noticeably quieter. That is the story behind one of the most surprising scenes of the Cincinnati Open, because Eala's exit did more than end her tournament. It exposed just how much attention, energy, and emotion one 21-year-old player had brought with her. To understand why the change was so dramatic, you have to understand what Cincinnati looked like before her elimination. The Linna Family Tennis Center had been filled with Philippine flags. Fans were traveling specifically to see Eala play, and the tournament atmosphere around her matches was completely different from what you would normally expect during an Eala round. Filipino food appeared around the grounds, merchandise became a major part of the experience, and flags were reportedly selling out quickly. Every time Eala stepped onto the court, the crowd responded. One commentator compared the atmosphere to a basketball game rather than a normal tennis match. That comparison says almost everything. People weren't simply watching another match on the schedule. They were waiting for Eala. Some fans were reportedly paying close to $1,000 on the resale market just to watch her play in the second round. And according to the figures presented around the tournament, a huge share of ticket inquiries centered on one question: when is Alex Eala playing? That wasn't an isolated Cincinnati story either. Her popularity had already been visible during the North American hardcourt swing. In Washington, a huge portion of ticket interest was connected to her fan base. In Toronto, her matches were moved to a larger court because demand had become difficult to contain. The message was becoming impossible to ignore. Eala was not simply building a tennis resume. She was building an audience. And then came August 17, 2026. Late at night in Cincinnati, Eala faced Amanda Anisimova, a world-class opponent with a resume that included a top 3 ranking and 2 Grand Slam final appearances. On paper, it was a brutally difficult matchup. But once the match began, Eala made it clear that she had no intention of simply playing the role of the young underdog. The opening set lasted 67 minutes and became a test of patience almost immediately. One game stretched for roughly 20 minutes and included 13 deuces. Anisimova created 8 breakpoint opportunities, but Eala somehow escaped every one of them. Point after point, she refused to give away the game. That was the part of Eala's game that stood out. She wasn't winning because everything was easy. She was winning because she kept finding answers when the pressure became uncomfortable. Eventually, she earned the break she needed and closed the opening set 6-4. The crowd exploded. Philippine flags rose through the stands, and suddenly the possibility of another major upset felt very real. But Anisimova wasn't going away. The second set became much tighter. Both players protected their serves through the early stages, and neither wanted to give the other an opening. Then Anisimova finally found the breakthrough. She secured a crucial break, defended the advantage, and forced the match into a deciding set. At 1 set apiece, everything was still possible. And Eala came out of the changeover with incredible energy. She held serve, broke immediately afterward, and moved ahead 2-0. The stadium came alive again. Fans knew exactly what they were watching. Eala had already made a habit of challenging the best players in the world, and this looked like another night where she might produce something extraordinary. She had beaten Aryna Sabalenka twice. She had defeated Jessica Pegula. She had taken down Elena Rybakina. She had already shown that the ranking beside an opponent's name did not intimidate her. Coming into this match, her record against top 10 opponents stood at 9 wins and 4 losses. Now she was only a few games away from another statement victory. Then came the turning point. In the 5th game of the deciding set, Eala reached 40-15. She was 2 points away from taking a 3-2 lead with momentum firmly on her side. The crowd was ready for another roar. Everything seemed to be moving in her direction. And then the match changed. Eala lost the next 4 points. Just 4 points. Anisimova turned that opportunity into a break, and suddenly the player who had been fighting from behind was in control. Eala tried to respond, but Anisimova had found another level. She won 6 of the final 7 games, broke Eala's serve 3 times in the deciding set, and closed out the contest 4-6, 6-2, 6-2 for Eala. It was a devastating ending to a match she had been so close to winning. For the stadium, the transformation was immediate. The player who had brought the loudest support of the week was gone. The flags began disappearing. Fans started making their way toward the exits. The chants faded. The energy that had surrounded Eala's matches was replaced by something much quieter. And that is where the story becomes bigger than one loss. Because after the match, Anisimova was asked to speak to the crowd, and what she said was surprisingly revealing. She praised Eala's ability, called her a fighter, and acknowledged how difficult the match had been. But then she went further. Anisimova openly recognized how much support Eala had received throughout the night. That mattered. This wasn't a commentator describing Eala's popularity from the outside. It wasn't a journalist analyzing ticket numbers. It was the player who had just defeated Eala standing at the winner's microphone and acknowledging that her opponent was deeply loved by the crowd. Anisimova even joked that the support she received had given her the boost she needed because it was already past her bedtime. The crowd laughed, but underneath the joke was a serious point. Eala had become important enough to affect the atmosphere even when she wasn't the player winning the match. Think about that for a second. A 21-year-old player, still early in her professional career, had created an environment where an opponent could feel the difference in the building simply because Eala was on the other side of the net. That is the Eala effect. And it raises an uncomfortable question for tournaments. How much can one player actually influence an event? Cincinnati still had some of the biggest names in women's tennis. The draw had world-class competitors, Grand Slam champions, and established stars. There was absolutely no shortage of elite tennis left to watch. Yet after Eala's elimination, the emotional center of the tournament felt different. That doesn't mean the tournament literally collapsed or that nobody cared about the remaining matches. It means Eala had created a unique connection with fans that couldn't simply be replaced by another name on the draw sheet. The numbers and scenes surrounding her matches made that clear. Resale prices had climbed dramatically for her appearances. Ticket demand was strongly connected to her schedule. Philippine flags were disappearing from merchandise stands. Food offerings were adjusted to accommodate the audience she was bringing. And the stands repeatedly reflected just how many people had traveled to see one particular player. For tournament organizers, that kind of popularity is both exciting and challenging. It is exciting because a young player can generate attention that established stars would love to have. But it can also be risky when so much atmosphere becomes attached to one athlete. If that player loses early, the emotional momentum can disappear with her. And that is exactly what Cincinnati experienced. But there is another side to this story, and it may be the most important one. Eala's loss does not erase what she accomplished. She is only 21 years old. She has already defeated 9 top 10 opponents this season. She won her first WTA title in Washington and defeated Jessica Pegula in the final. She reached the 4th round at Wimbledon. And now she has gone 3 hard-fought sets against a player who has already reached 2 Grand Slam finals.